Extinction Rebellion managed to get headlines this weekend by preventing print newspapers from being distributed across the UK. Was it a masterstroke of campaigning, or was it the latest in a series of own goals? Let's have a look. My name's Mallen Baker. This is the Mallen Baker Show for Changemakers. Extinction Rebellion are attacking the free press. That, in any case, has been the headline over the last few days. So on Friday night, the campaigners blockaded several print works that produce a number of the mainstream papers, sites in Broxbourne, Liverpool and Glasgow. It affected The Sun, The Times, The Daily Mail, The Daily Telegraph and The Financial Times. Because of the vulnerability of key sites like Broxbourne, where a single road was the only exit point and therefore easily blockaded, plus the apparent slow response of the police for removing them, millions of copies of the newspapers either failed to go out at all or went out much delayed. If the aim of the campaigners was to attract attention, they certainly achieved it. When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, that also attracted attention. I give that as a comparison because the British press doesn't have an entirely benign reputation when you directly attack its interests. The Prime Minister and the Home Secretary Priti Patel were amongst the many who lined up to condemn the action. Boris Johnson tweeted, "A free press is vital in holding the government and other powerful institutions to account on issues critical for the future of our country, including the fight against climate change. It is completely unacceptable to seek to limit the public's access to news in this way." The response from XR could be summarised in these three key points. One, it's not an attack on the free press because it's not a free press when the majority is owned by 5 billionaires. Two, Murdoch papers particularly spew lies and hate. And three, it wasn't an attack on the free press because it was just one day. And anyway, all those papers are published online as well. This is what it said on its website. The entire institution of the media follows the same toxic rulebook, dehumanising marginalised groups and perpetuating inequality. It has become necessary to block lies in order to free the truth. Banners reading "Free the Truth" and "Five Crooks Control Our News" drew attention to the disgraceful true colours of our free press. What we read in the papers is controlled by a handful of powerful billionaires who feed us stories that suit their interests. XR spokesperson Rupert Reed added his voice, "We cannot win, many of us will not live, unless the filter of lies that is the denialist press is removed. Think of it this way. Extinction Rebellion is the world's face mask, replacing the death mask of Murdoch." Their 5 hate figures are Lord Rothermere, owner of the Daily Mail and the Metro, Rupert Murdoch, owner of the Sun and the Times, Richard Desmond, owner of the Express and the Daily Star, the Barclay brothers, owners of the Daily Telegraph, and Alexander and Evgeny Lebedev, owners of the Independent and the London Evening Standard. They missed out the Financial Times, which is owned by Nikkei, a public limited company. They missed out the Daily Mirror and the Daily Record, owned by Trinity Mirror. And they missed out the Guardian, owned by the Scott Trust. It's not clear to me how many different owners you need to have to classify as having a free press. I mean, there we have 8. We have journals positioned to the right, like the Telegraph and the Mail, those that are largely centre, the Financial Times, Independent and the Times, and those that are on the left, the Guardian, the Mirror and the Daily Record. So what is the essence of contention here? It seems to be that the political activists of XR dislike the owners of some of these, particularly Murdoch, but also anyone who might count generally as being a billionaire or kind of on the way to it. And secondly, that some of these papers don't reflect the world as they see it. Neither of those are arguments in support of the contention that we don't have a free press. And I speak as someone who's often been critical of the behaviour of some of its representatives. I think there's absolutely some valid criticisms you can make. It's just that this doesn't really hold up as one of them. Do you know how to spot when you don't have a free press? Because if you try to run a paper that criticises the government, it gets shut down. Journalists get harassed or imprisoned or even killed. Like Hong Kong, for instance, where the media owner, Jimmy Lai, has been arrested under China's national security law, and where journalists are now being harassed, newsrooms raided, and so on. That's a reasonable tell for when you don't have a free press. Still, in spite of the political spectrum that the UK newspapers span, there was one thing that all the papers agreed about, which was that the Extinction Rebellion action was misconceived. Even The Guardian, which said this: "We fully support the right to protest, but we do not condone any action that restricts the public's right to access journalism and buy whichever newspaper they choose." Which is part of the whole point of a free press. People are able to choose what they want to read. People with different voices and different opinions can be heard, and there are no barriers to anyone deciding to create a new voice. If Extinction Rebellion supporters want to create a newspaper that's filled with predictions of the end of the world whenever there's a spell of bad weather, nothing to stop them from doing so, because we have a free press. There might be one thing that does prevent it, potentially, which is that if too few people would want to buy it to make it financially viable. And indeed, The Guardian has been limping along for years, even though it is the mainstream choice of the left. So why are some of the papers owned by very wealthy people? Well, largely because they run successful businesses. They know how to give people what they want. And it becomes something of a self-selecting process in that sense. The news organisations that survive are the ones that are successful. Because they're successful, the people that own them make lots of money. And there are sometimes issues with how the press is run, for sure. Governments could be more courageous in addressing them. All of those are valid points of discussion. We would have lots of points of agreement, frankly. There's lots more that should be done to hold the press to account. But let's be clear. What Extinction Rebellion are arguing for is indeed an attack on the free press, because their chief complaint is that these papers, in their opinion, don't tell the truth as they see it. And they should therefore change their ways, else they will have XR taking actions to damage their business. On their website, they say this: "The news industry has a key role to play in the transformation we need to face up to the intersecting crises. We desperately need them to stop spreading hatred and lies and instead take a real lead to help us hold our government to account. Media, your country needs you. Free the truth. And remember Rupert Reed's words: the filter of lies that is the denialist press must be removed, or else many of us will not live." Those are words I would associate with fanaticism. Now, one case I'm very reluctant to make, but it probably should be made, is that Rupert Reed and the rest are plain wrong. Whilst accusing others of lying, they call the papers they target the denialist press. I'm not aware that any of them deny that climate change is happening. I regularly scan The Times as one of the sources that I review, and they carry climate change related pieces often, and they're amongst the better journals for representing new research in a factual manner. Much has been made of the fact that the edition of The Sun that XR disrupted has an editorial piece by David Attenborough about the importance of taking action on climate change. Ironically, he also had this to say: "I don't think it is sensible politics to break the law. If you are any good at all, some of your demands will be met, and then you will be demanding people abide by those new laws. You can't have it both ways." Although, if you have to be good to achieve that, then I suppose it makes sense that XR may not be holding out that much hope. XR do give a couple of examples of supposed press transgressions, all of which relate to the Sun newspaper, because they really don't like Rupert Murdoch. For example, while the NFU, which is the National Farmers Union, warned that due to the extreme weather, a result of climate change, the wheat harvest would be down by 30%, the Sun was silent. As EDF admitted that construction of the Sizewell nuclear power plant would emit 5.7 million tonnes of CO2, the Sun took a pop at vegans. And as Storm Francis caused widespread damage, the Sun failed to make the link to climate change. And yet, On the 2nd of September, The Sun reported on methane in Siberia. On the 1st of September, it's reported on ice sheets melting faster than expected. On the 20th of August, it reported on Storm Ellen and said this: the stormy conditions come just a week after scorching temperatures across the UK, with the mercury hitting 34C for 6 consecutive days. Mr. Miles said, we have gone from one extreme to the other. The first thing that springs to my mind is with these sorts of events is climate change. We are likely to see these swings in extreme events more frequently. Although I couldn't necessarily say these two events were directly caused by climate change, it's likely that these sort of swings in our weather will become more frequent. On the 19th of August, The Sun carried an opinion piece that could have come straight from Extinction Rebellion itself. Apocalypse now! Humanity near point of no return, as top MIT professor warns of just 5 ways to prevent total human extinction, which is pretty out there, frankly. So the argument that Rupert Murdoch papers are denialist press and don't talk about these issues is demonstrably not true. Doesn't seem the group made any serious attempt to actually evaluate their content. They simply acted on the prejudices of their political activism. But I said I was reluctant to make this case, and I am. Why? Because to get into arguing about that is to concede XR's territory, that newspapers should be following their agenda in order to earn legitimacy. Frankly, even if one or more of these papers did have an editorial position towards climate skepticism, that does not give you the right to say it must be silenced. How can you not get it? Shutting down voices with messages you don't want to be heard is the very denial of a free press. Extinction Rebellion only believes that voices are valid if they entirely align with their own. Covering the issue and reporting the science isn't enough. It has to be the same hubristic conclusion that many will die, which is not supported by the mainstream science. Now, there's nothing wrong, of course, with protesting how a paper reports something, or how it behaves generally. You can protest anything you want in the UK. There's just a huge gap between doing that and deciding that others are not allowed to read what they want, regardless of your approval. Now, unfortunately, badly thought out actions all too often have consequences for real people. In this case, those real people included newsagents across the country, many of them already struggling because of a pandemic, who lost a day's business from their newspapers. One small newsagent told the BBC that she thought they'd lost around £700 on that day. And in response to the highlighting that hardship that was being felt by thousands of small businesses, XR simply said, sorry. So that's all right then. In the immediate aftermath, we saw the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, contemplating whether the group should be reclassified as an organised crime group. Now that sounds outlandish, as though it'd be putting them in the same category as the mafia-style organisations. The rationale, I assume, is that their actions are routinely and deliberately organised to break the law. If it's habitually what you do, then you can't suggest it's not an essential part of how you work. If it were so classified, then my understanding is that would mean that people would not legally be able to donate money to it or provide assistance to it. You'd certainly see corporate donations disappear and probably much else besides. Obviously, Extinction Rebellion are fighting back hard against that and holding it up to be a ridiculous proposition. The line that you often see is that it shouldn't be against the law to protest about inaction on climate change. And they're right. It shouldn't be. And it isn't. It's willful blindness to conflate legal protest with actions that are specifically set out to break the law as a campaign tactic. It is by definition illegal to break the law. I know, it's a shocker. They're forever bleating on about, oh, so-and-so got arrested for peacefully protesting. No, she didn't. She got arrested for criminal damage or obstruction or whatever it was. Now, that said, I don't agree that the authorities should be overreacting and taking draconian actions. As far as I'm aware, the existing laws should have been sufficient to remove Extinction Rebellion blockades quickly and efficiently. In any case, the right way to deal with it is, as always, to refute the group's position with argument and reason, not to make martyrs of them with draconian measures. And not with the tabloid papers doing what they usually do to people that have attacked them, going after the individuals involved to destroy their lives and turn them into social pariahs. I wouldn't wish those sorts of things on anybody, neither should anyone else. Unfortunately, unlike the Canning Town tube train debacle, which XR people recognised had been a disaster as soon as it happened, there's no sign of self-awareness amongst the activist chatter that I've seen. So we're just going to have to sit back and wait for the next thing. And in a few months, no doubt, we'll be hearing them complaining about how much they're getting attacked now in the newspapers. And no doubt that will all be down to the evil Mr. Murdoch rather than anything they might have done themselves. And they'll still be telling themselves that they're saving the world, even as they've done more than anybody else to lose support for the cause that they claim to care about. Well, that's my opinion anyway. It's a free world, so you can disagree with it, in which case tell me about it in the comments below.